How's it going? So this is going to be my review of the new Spider-Man movie, Across the Spider-Verse. And it's going to have tons and tons of spoilers. So if you don't want to see spoilers, you've been warned because that's all that's going to happen. And I'm sure people are going to talk about it in the comments too. So if you don't want this spoiled, which I suggest that you don't have this spoiled, so don't watch this movie because a lot of cool things happen and I'm going to talk about them. So you've been warned. So let me start. First of all, this theater was not packed at all. I could easily find tickets, no problem. And back in the day, it used to be like if you wanted to watch an Avengers film or something like that, you had to get tickets months in advance and you got the worst seats possible. But nope, this literally just pretty much walked right in at 7:30. I watched it on a Thursday night. But I've realized now recently that doesn't really mean much because it is the same for Guardians, and Guardians will probably cross $1 billion. So I don't think money is going to be an issue for this film. I think it's going to make a ton of money. But let me just first say that if this movie doesn't win an Oscar for, I don't know, what do they have? Do they have a best like art kind of thing, like animation? I know they have an animation category, but I think that's just an animated film. Like, what's the best animated film? But for animation, like the actual drawings and stuff like that, this by far is the best animated film I've ever seen. Visually looking, like the care, the art that went in, best by far, by a mile. If you thought what was the first one? Enter the Spider-Verse or something like that? Whatever it was. The first one, and if you thought that was good, this destroys it. Like the first one, I was like, wow, this is so cool. I love it. The animation, the art style is so interesting, so cool. This one, a million times better. Like it is, he goes in between worlds, and each world is done with a different animation style, different art style. So cool. Everything is so awesome. I love it. And he goes back to his original one, the one you see in the first movie, and you're like, wow, this is not even, it's kind of boring actually. It's actually the most boring one is his animation style, Miles Morales's. But this oh my gosh, then there's this part like Gwen Stacy's world is by far the best. Like I love it. But there's also another one. They don't go into the world, but you see characters from that world. Is the Vulture. There's a scene where they fight the Vulture. Loved it. I just like, even my wife was just like, when the Vulture popped up, you just like went all crazy. You got all excited. And I was like, it was awesome. Also, there's the Spider Punk one. His art style is very cool. Actually, the most boring one would be probably Miles Morales, probably because I'm just used to it by now. But that's nothing to take away from the movie at all. This movie is fantastic. I highly recommend. A lot of people, you know, I mean, I would imagine a lot of people would like this type of animation style. I mean, maybe it's just me personally, but definitely one of the, I think the best in terms of animation I've ever seen. It is, I can't, it's 100 out of a 10. Like, it is so cool. Now, on to the movie itself. The movie itself, I think the movie itself was actually really good too. Is it as good as the first one? I think so. Sometimes I think so. Overall, it is. Um, you There's a lot of focus on a bunch of different characters, and I actually really walked away from this movie really liking Gwen Stacy's her story arc. I think she had the best story arc in the whole thing. I actually really liked Spider-Man India. I think his character and his arc was really cool. Spider-Punk was in it, but he didn't really have much of a backstory. He's just kind of a cool character in the background. I actually found Miles Morales like the most boring one story arc, and not in a negative way. It just compared to the other ones is just kind of and I, but also we got most of his story in the first one. So you don't really need as much. But I found Gwen Stacy, any like her story arc had probably the most heart, had the most character development, had the best emotion, just overall plot and everything what was going on with her. I liked hers a lot. Spider-Man 2099. He didn't have too much of a backstory, but he had kind of a story arc, and I really liked him. It was actually done by Oscar Isaac, who did a fantastic job as Spider-Man 2099. He was a fantastic, I guess, villain, so to speak, in a way. It was the most like villains that you can relate with and make sense are the best villains. The ones where they think they're the good guy and you actually think they could be the good guy. Those are the best villains in my opinion. So I think Spider-Man 2099 was very, very good at that. Um, but overall, this movie was fantastic. It was a great film. I recommend watching it in the theater because you get the whole theater experience. And it's definitely amazing to watch this animation on screen. Man, the Vulture was fantastic. Gwen Stacy's was fantastic. Spider-Punk was interesting and very cool to look at. And every time they time traveled, if they had a piece of gear when they or universe traveled, um, it was in their style, which was also pretty cool. Spot, the villain was the other villain was fantastic. I really liked it. Starts off with this goofy kind of character and then develops into this like maniac. And when he gets more powerful, his animation gets even like weirder and stuff. Oh, it's great. I, like visually watching it, it's like you're watching comic book panels come to life. And, you know, with each comic book artist, they have their unique style. So there's a lot of like Assad Ribic in there. And it's just fantastic to watch. Like I could not recommend this movie enough. If I had to give it like some nitpicks, one nitpick that me and my wife were both talking about, which could borderline as a negative, but it's more of a nitpick. It was too long, and I looked it up. It's the longest animated film there is, at least like a normal USA released film. I'm sure there's some like art project that's like 50 hours long or something. I don't know, but like a normal release theater US movie, it's the longest animated film. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I wish there's some parts where if they just would have cut out a few of like kind of the dragging scenes with Miles Morales and his family, it's like they really try to drive that home, and they've had multiple scenes to do that. I just feel like if they just cut some of those out and made them a little shorter, you still get the same point across, and it still just like works as a whole, and it just would have been better. And those were the kind of scenes that kind of dragged. But in the end, it doesn't really like take too much away from the film. That was like a nitpick, I would say, is the length. Some people say that's a good thing because they want to spend more time in that world, but there was some parts that kind of slowed down a little bit, and it was during those like family times that just it was. They kind of said the same thing over and over, but just different scenes throughout the film. It's like, okay, you really only need, instead of having like four of those scenes, like maybe you only have like two to really get your point across. So that part, or maybe not so long. Anyways, this movie ends. Oh, as far as like comedy, it's not as funny as the first one. Because the first one had that fish out of water kind of thing with Miles Morales trying to become Spider-Man, and then you had Peter Parker Spider-Man, and he was in it the whole time. I find Peter Parker Spider-Man like the normal Peter Parker. There's lots of Peter Parkers in there, but the normal one, I find him actually a better character than Miles Morales, in my opinion. Peter Parker Spider-Man is a lot funnier, has those quips. It's very Deadpool esque. And so I like that. I feel like that's funnier. The Peter Parker Spider-Man was barely in it, and he had a baby, which was like, I don't know if it worked very well. But Miles Morales is a much more somber character. He's much more like, I don't know the term to use, but kind of like a sad sack, I guess, of a character. He's always like a little bit more mopey, not as funny, and just the character itself. And it's not bad. It's just I find myself liking Peter Parker Spider-Man a lot more than Miles' character. In this one, it's kind of like the same thing as in the first one. Once again, I'm nitpicking here, where he's a fish out of water. He doesn't really understand. He's kind of confused about his powers and where he's placed in the world. And by the end of it, he kind of gets all his confidence. Well, in this one, they kind of like draw it back a little bit, and he goes back to that kind of non-confident character, and they use that same story arc, and by the end of it he's like, I know who I am. And it's like, well, that was the same story arc that you had in the first one. It was like this one, but a little more watered down. So that's why I was like, his character arc was probably the worst of all of them. Not saying that makes it a bad film. It's more of like I liked it when they focused on the other characters better. But other than that, like those are just a few nitpicks. It ends on a cliffhanger, um, which was cool because the next one apparently is coming out in like 8 months, 9 months, which is awesome. You don't have to wait forever for it, which thank God. I think the last one came out like 5 years ago. If you had to wait like 5 years or even 3 years for the next one, I'd be like, that's don't end on a cliffhanger. It's literally like a cliffhanger, like a movie. So I'm glad that they've rushed the next one and that's coming out. So very, 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 very good. I would say overall. Um, can't really think of any. There's probably like some minor things in there that I can't really think of that are like negatives. Overall, it's a very positive film, very fun. The next one looks like it's going to set up. He goes to another universe, which he thinks is his own, but it really isn't his own. And he finds himself there, but there is no Spider Man there. And Miles Morales in that universe is actually the Prowler. So obviously he's going to fight himself. I have a feeling because in the Prowler's universe, his dad died. That's why he became the Prowler. I have a feeling that what's going to happen is the Prowler is going to go to Miles' normal universe and he's going to see his dad there and he's going to change his ways and they're going to be friends again and they're going to stop Spot. I feel like I hope they don't do that. I hope something tragic actually happens. I hope they take that leap and make something really tragic happen. Like maybe Miles' dad dies, or something happens. And don't make that villain turn to a good person type of thing. I really, it's just a little too cliche, and you can see it coming from a mile away. But other than that, I thought, I don't know what the next one will hold. I think it's going to focus on some new characters and some older characters as well. But yeah, it's a great movie. I recommend it. I'm if I had to give it a score, a 10 out of 10, like just because that animation style is so great. If you take away the animation altogether and it was just the story itself, I would give it like a 9 out of 10. Like it's not as funny as the first one. The first half is pretty funny, but then it gets into this more serious tone, which is totally fine. There's nothing against the movie. So if you're expecting a lot of laughs, you'll have some laughs, not as many laughs, but the stuff that's in there is funny. Yeah, I would recommend this. Go watch it in theaters. It's definitely a 10 out of 10 in my book, especially with the animation style. You will not be disappointed at all. Highly, highly recommend. And let me know once you guys do watch it. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. Have a good day.